The click was definitive, not the soft mechanical snick of a traditional lock, but the cold digital finality of a system deciding I was no longer welcome. I stood on my own porch in the biting November wind, my keycard dead in my hand, the smart lock on my door glowing a defiant, mocking red. An error message popped up on the tiny screen. Access denied. Please contact your system administrator. Have a great day. My administrator. My nephew. Leo. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers stiff from the chill, and saw the text message he had sent just moments before. Hi, Aunt Catherine. Noticed your account was flagged for unusual activity. I've temporarily suspended your access for security reasons. Maybe now you'll appreciate the benefits of professional system management. Stay warm. Stay warm. I was locked out of my own home, in the dark, without a coat. My heart medication was on the kitchen counter. He hadn't just inconvenienced me. He had put my life at risk, all because I had dared to question his precious, insecure HOA app. He saw me as a Luddite, a dinosaur who didn't understand technology. He had forgotten who taught him how to write his first line of code on a Commodore 64. He had forgotten that before I retired to this quiet life, my colleagues in the world of cybersecurity knew me by a different name, Nix. He thought he had locked me out. He had no idea he had just let me in. If you believe every locked door has a key and that tech bullies deserve a permanent system crash, then do me a favor. Let me know which city you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and let's get ready to bypass some firewalls. My nephew, Leo, was what the kids today call a tech bro. He had an ounce of talent and a ton of unearned confidence. He'd dropped out of Stanford to launch a startup, Aegis Home Solutions, which was just a fancy name for a system he'd built by stitching together open-source smart home software. It was clunky, insecure, and, as I would soon discover, failing financially. I, on the other hand, came from a different era of technology. In the late 80s and 90s, while my peers were breaking into systems for fun, I was getting paid by the government and Fortune 500 companies to do the same thing, but for a different reason. To find their weaknesses before the bad guys did. I was a white-hat hacker, a digital ghost who could walk through any firewall. My work in developing some of the first commercial encryption protocols had made me a quiet legend in certain circles. I retired with a comfortable nest egg and a desire for nothing more than a quiet life, a garden, and a good book. My peace was shattered when Leo, in a desperate attempt to save his failing company, got himself elected to our HOA board. His one and only platform was to modernize our community with his Aegis system. He sold it to the board as a mandatory, cutting-edge upgrade for security and convenience, a way to control everything from our locks and thermostats to our community gate access, all from one handy app. I was the only one who objected. At the town hall meeting, I stood up and raised what I thought were reasonable concerns. What are the data privacy policies? I asked. Is the data stored on-site or in the cloud? Is it encrypted? Has the system undergone independent, third-party penetration testing? Leo had just laughed, a smug, condescending sound. Aunt Catherine, he said, patting me on the shoulder as if I were a confused toddler. Don't you worry your pretty little head about the technical details. It's all very secure. This is the future. We can't let fear of the new hold our community back. He had framed my professional expertise as the ramblings of an old woman afraid of change. The board, dazzled by his slick presentation, approved the mandatory installation. 2 weeks later, my sturdy, reliable deadbolt was replaced by his glowing smart lock. My crime, the one that led to my exile on my own porch, was simple. I had found a minor but irritating bug in the system. The lock would randomly fail to engage if the temperature dropped below freezing. I had reported it through the official channels, submitting a detailed bug report just as I had done thousands of times in my career. For Leo, this was not a helpful piece of feedback. It was a personal insult, a challenge to his genius. His response wasn't to fix the bug, but to punish the person who found it. And so I found myself shivering in the dark, the red light on my door a beacon of his petty tyranny. But as I stood there, the cold seeping into my bones, the old familiar fire began to burn in my chest. The analytical part of my brain, the part that lived for a challenge, took over. He thought his power came from his admin password. He was about to learn that true power comes from understanding how the system is built and how to take it apart, piece by piece. I walked to the side of the house, to the outdoor power outlet I used for my garden tools. I retrieved the emergency go bag I kept hidden in the waterproof storage bench, a habit from a lifetime of professional paranoia. Inside was a small, powerful laptop and a set of network cables. This wasn't a job for a lockpick. This was a job for a keyboard. He had locked the door. I was about to take ownership of the entire house. Huddled behind the relative shelter of a large azalea bush, I plugged my laptop into the outdoor outlet. The cold was making my fingers stiff, but my mind was sharp, focused by a slow-burning rage. Leo's system was an amateur's creation, and amateurs always make the same mistakes. They focus on the fancy user interface, the bells and whistles, and they neglect the foundation. They build a pretty house on sand. I connected my laptop to the home's network through an external port. His first mistake? He hadn't disabled the physical access ports. A child's error. Within minutes, I was past the consumer-grade firewall and looking at the guts of his system. It was worse than I thought. The code was sloppy, inefficient, a Frankenstein's monster of borrowed scripts, and it was leaking data like a sieve. My first objective was simple: get back in my house. I didn't need to break his encryption. I just needed to find the back door. And every amateur programmer leaves one, intentionally or not. I scanned the user authentication protocols and found it in less than 10 minutes. He had hard-coded a master developer password into the system's root directory, a password he had likely used for testing and forgotten to remove. And the password itself? Leo? The genius one. I almost laughed out loud. The arrogance, the sheer unadulterated hubris. I typed in the password. The smart lock on my front door clicked open with a welcoming green glow. I was in, but I wasn't finished. Before I even stepped inside to the warmth, I performed one more task. I accessed the administrator control panel, located Leo's admin account for my property, and permanently revoked all his access privileges. Then, I changed the master developer password to a 64-character alphanumeric string that would take him 1,000 years to crack. He had locked me out for an hour. I had just locked him out of my life and his own system forever. Once inside, with a hot cup of tea warming my hands and my medication taken, the second phase of my plan began. This was no longer just about getting back into my house. This was about a professional audit. He had used this system as a weapon. I needed to know the full extent of its capabilities and its criminality. I spent the next 3 days in a state of deep focus, fueled by caffeine and a lifetime. With a compressed, encrypted file containing irrefutable proof of Leo's crimes saved on a secure thumb drive, I shifted my focus from digital warfare to psychological warfare. A simple data dump to the authorities would put him in prison, but it wouldn't deliver the lesson he so richly deserved. His crime was one of public arrogance. His punishment had to be one of public humiliation. The annual HOA budget meeting in 2 weeks was the perfect stage. My first move was to sow the seeds of doubt, to create an atmosphere of unease before I delivered the killing blow. I started with a quiet, off-the-record conversation with one of the more reasonable board members, a retired accountant named Arthur. I invited him over for coffee, framing my concerns under the guise of an old woman worried about technology. "Arthur," I began, my voice a carefully crafted quiver of concern. "I know I'm not the most tech-savvy person, but this new Aegis system, it makes me nervous. It seems to have access to so much of our lives. I'm just worried about the security of it all." "Oh, Leo assured us it's top of the line," Arthur said, a bit dismissively. "I'm sure he did," I said, leaning in. "But I did a little reading online, just basic cybersecurity hygiene. And I found a tool that lets you see the data traffic coming from your own home network. It was probably nothing, but it looked like a lot of my personal data was being sent to a server I didn't recognize, and it didn't look like it was encrypted. It's probably just my old computer, but it did make me wonder if the board has ever received a copy of the system's independent security audit." I saw a flicker of concern in Arthur's eyes. He was an accountant, a man who understood the importance of audits and verification. "An independent audit? I don't believe we ever did," he mused. Leo just gave us his own company's security white paper. I'm sure it's fine, I said, patting his hand. I'm probably just being a silly old woman. But with all the stories in the news about data breaches, one can never be too careful with our community's private information. The seed was planted. I had given a fellow numbers person just enough information to make him professionally curious and deeply uneasy. I knew Arthur would start asking quiet questions. Next, I turned my attention to the system itself, but not in a way Leo could trace back to me. From the master control panel I now commanded, I could see every bug, every glitch in the network. I started anonymously reporting them, not to the HOA, but to the residents themselves on the community forum. I created a throwaway email and a fake username, Concerned Neighbor 123, and began posting helpful tips. Hi everyone, my first post read. Has anyone else noticed their Aegis-controlled thermostat seems to reset itself every night at 3 a.m.? Found a workaround in an online forum. Here's a link. The link was to a legitimate tech help site, but the act of posting it publicly highlighted a flaw in Leo's perfect system. My next post was about the gate. Heads up. The community gate seems to have a glitch where it won't open if you approach it going more than 5 meters. Make sure to slow to a crawl. These weren't critical failures, just annoying, persistent bugs. But by bringing them into the public consciousness, I was chipping away at the myth of Leo's genius. He had sold them a seamless, futuristic system, and I was subtly revealing it to be a clunky, unreliable product. The residents, who had been privately annoyed by these glitches, now saw they weren't alone. A quiet undercurrent of dissatisfaction began to build. My final move before the meeting was the most direct. I knew Leo's system was connected to the clubhouse's main AV equipment, including the large projector he would use for his presentation. From my home office, I exploited the same developer backdoor I had used to regain access to my house. I logged into the clubhouse's system as an administrator. I didn't change anything. I didn't leave a trace. I just opened a port, a single hidden digital doorway that only I knew about. I now had the ability to override the projector's input from my own laptop, wirelessly, from anywhere in the room. The night of the annual meeting, the clubhouse was filled with the low murmur of suburban discontent. My anonymous posts had worked. People were grumbling about their thermostats, the gate, the unreliability of the app. Leo seemed oblivious, striding to the podium with a confident smile, a USB stick in his hand. He was about to give a presentation on the system's overwhelming success and robust financial performance. He plugged in his drive, and his company's logo, a stylized Spartan helmet, appeared on the giant screen behind him. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice booming with false confidence. "I'm thrilled to report that in its first year, the Aegis system has been a resounding success, bringing our community into the 21st century and enhancing our property values." He launched into a series of slick, meaningless charts showing user engagement and system uptime. I sat in the back row, my own laptop open but dimmed. I waited. I let him build up his own narrative, his own mountain of lies. I let him bask in the spotlight, feeling powerful and untouchable. He finally arrived at his financial slide. "And as you can see from our transparent billing report," he said, gesturing to a chart that showed the full $500,000 annual fee paid by the HOA, "our partnership has been a model of fiscal clarity and efficiency." That was my cue. "Excuse me, Leo," I said, my voice cutting through the room clear and calm. "I have a question about that slide." He looked out into the crowd, annoyed by the interruption. He saw me, and a condescending smile spread across his face. "Ah, Aunt Catherine. I'm sure you have a question. Is your Wi-Fi working all right?" A few of his cronies on the board snickered. "My Wi-Fi is working perfectly," I replied, my fingers hovering over my keyboard. "In fact, it's working so well, I think I've found a slight discrepancy in your financial report. Perhaps I could show everyone." And with a single keystroke, I activated my script. The image on the screen behind Leo flickered. His corporate logo vanished, replaced by a new image that I had prepared. It was a simple, side-by-side comparison. On the left was the HOA's bank statement, showing a $48,000 monthly payment to Aegis Home Solutions. On the right was Aegis Home Solutions' internal revenue report for that same month, showing an income of only $24,000. And between them, a single bright red arrow pointed from the discrepancy to a third box, which contained the details of an anonymous offshore bank account. A collective gasp went through the room. Leo stared at the screen, his face turning from a healthy tan to a ghostly, bloodless white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was a deer in the digital headlights. "Leo," I said, my voice now ringing with an authority no one in that room had ever heard from me before. "Could you please explain to your neighbors where the other $24,000 went?" Leo stood frozen at the podium, his confident posture crumbling in real time. He looked like a statue caught in a lightning strike. The image on the screen behind him was a digital death sentence, a perfectly clear, undeniable accusation of grand larceny. He spun around, staring at the numbers, then back at his own laptop, fumbling with the mouse as if he could somehow click the evidence away. But the screen was no longer under his control. It was mine. That's a fabrication," he finally stammered, his voice a weak, strangled version of its former self. "My aunt has clearly doctored these images. She's been trying to sabotage this system from the beginning." "Have I?" I asked, my voice remaining calm. I pressed another key. The image on the screen changed. Now it displayed a live, read-only feed of his system's own source code, with the specific subroutine that diverted the funds highlighted in bright yellow. For the tech-savvy people in the room, it was a smoking gun. For everyone else, I made it simple. This, everyone, is the part of Leo's code that automatically steals 50% of our money every month and sends it to an untraceable offshore account, I explained, as if I were teaching a class. It's a very elegant piece of criminal engineering. I'd almost be proud if it weren't so deeply illegal. Arthur, the retired accountant on the board, stood up, his face pale with fury. "Leo," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "Is this true? Have you been stealing from us?" Leo, now cornered and panicking, made his final fatal mistake. He tried to bluff. "This is a hack," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She has illegally hacked the system to frame me. This is a criminal act." "You're absolutely right, Leo," I said, a cold smile spreading across my face as I pressed my final key. "A hack is a criminal act, and luckily, your system has been logging every single administrative action." The image on the screen changed one last time. It now displayed the system's administrator access logs for the past 3 months. The room was silent as every head turned to read. They saw a log of Leo's own activities. Him accessing residents' private thermostat data, him viewing the entry and exit logs for his neighbors' homes, and, most damningly, the log from the night he had locked me out, showing his username manually activating the security lockout on my account. My final entry was at the bottom. It showed my own access, just a few hours ago, through the Leo the Genius 1 developer password. The room erupted. It wasn't just about the money anymore. He hadn't just been stealing from them, he had been spying on them. He had been violating their privacy, treating their homes and their lives as his personal data farm. The meeting descended into chaos. People were shouting, demanding his immediate arrest. The board members looked shell-shocked, realizing they had been duped by a charismatic fraudster. Leo, utterly and completely defeated, didn't even try to defend himself. He just slumped against the podium, his face buried in his hands. The police were called. 2 officers arrived to a scene of suburban pandemonium. They took statements from the board members, from me, and from a half-dozen furious residents. I handed over my thumb drive, containing the entire, neatly organized file of evidence. That night, my nephew, the tech genius, was quietly escorted from the clubhouse in handcuffs, his face hidden from the dozens of cell phone cameras now recording his every move. The aftermath was a legal and financial hurricane. Leo was charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and illegal access to computer systems. His failing startup, Aegis, collapsed into bankruptcy. Faced with irrefutable evidence, he took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison, and an order to pay back every cent he had stolen. The HOA was in ruins, both financially and in terms of trust, They had a massive, insecure, and now unsupported smart home system they were contractually obligated to maintain, and a huge budget shortfall. They were facing a potential class action lawsuit from the residents for their negligence. That was when I made my final move. At an emergency town hall a month later, I stood before my neighbors again. "What happened was a betrayal," I began. "But we cannot let one man's greed destroy our community. I have a proposal." I explained that I had spent the past month doing what I do best, a full, forensic audit of the Aegis system. "The bad news," I said, "is that the system is a security nightmare. The good news is that its foundation is built on open-source software. We don't need Leo or his company to run it." My proposal was simple. I would volunteer to lead a small resident-run tech committee. We would disconnect the system from all outside servers, making it a closed, local network. We would rewrite the insecure code, patch the vulnerabilities, and issue new secure passwords to every resident. We would, in essence, take control of the technology and make it our own, transforming Leo's spy machine into a genuinely useful and secure community tool. And as for the money he stole, I had an idea for that too. "The restitution payments will take years," I explained, "but we can start healing now. I propose we use the recovered funds not to just plug a hole in the budget, but to create a community technology grant, a scholarship fund to help a student from our local high school pursue a degree in computer science with a focus on ethical engineering." It was a move that no one expected. I wasn't just the person who had exposed the problem. I was now offering the solution. I was offering to use my legendary skills not for destruction, but for rebuilding. The community voted unanimously to approve my proposal. The hacker who had once been paid by governments to break into systems was now volunteering her time to build a secure, private network for her neighbors. The woman who had been locked out of her own home was now the one holding the master key to the entire community's digital life, and the money stolen by a corrupt tech bro was now going to fund the education of a new generation of ethical engineers. It was the perfect, final line of code in the story of my revenge. The months that followed Leo's conviction were a period of intense but satisfying work. I, the retired hacker once known as Nix, became the unlikely and unofficial Chief Technology Officer of the Willow Creek HOA. I assembled a small team of tech-savvy neighbors, a retired network engineer, a young software developer, and a sharp-eyed teenager who knew more about cybersecurity than most professionals. We called ourselves the Willow Creek Tech Committee. But in my mind, we were the Nix crew, a white-hat hacker collective working out of a suburban clubhouse. Our first task was to perform a digital exorcism on the Aegis system. We spent weekends hunched over laptops, methodically rewriting Leo's sloppy, malicious code. We severed the system's connection to all external servers, bringing all the data back within the confines of our own local network. We patched the security holes, strengthened the encryption, and purged every backdoor and developer password. We transformed Leo's spy machine into a closed, private, and secure intranet, controlled entirely by the residents it was meant to serve. My greatest satisfaction came from writing the new privacy policy. It was simple, clear, and absolute. No resident's personal data will ever be logged, stored, or accessed by any central administrator. Ever. The system is yours. Your home is your own. We had taken a tool of oppression and turned it into a shield for our privacy. The work was complex, but it was also deeply healing. It had been years since I had felt the thrill of a complex coding problem, the joy of collaborating with other smart minds. I wasn't just fixing a broken system. I was rediscovering a part of myself I thought I had left behind. The woman who had been called a Luddite and an old lady afraid of the future was now single-handedly building that future, but on her own ethical terms. As for my nephew, Leo, he was a ghost in the federal prison system. My sister, his mother, was devastated, torn between her love for her son and the undeniable horror of his crimes. She called me once, her voice choked with tears. "How could you do this to him, Catherine?" she asked. "He's your family." "He stopped being family the moment he locked me out of my house in the cold, a few feet away from my heart medication," I replied, my voice calm but unyielding. "He made a choice. And this is the consequence. He is not a victim, Sarah. He is a criminal, who got caught. The conversation was painful, and our relationship remained strained, but it was a necessary truth. My loyalty was to justice, not to a blood relation who had tried to harm me. The final piece of the puzzle was the scholarship fund. Once the restitution payments from Leo's seized assets began to trickle in, our committee, with the board's blessing, officially established the Willow Creek Ethical Engineering Scholarship. We partnered with the local high school, and the first scholarship was awarded the following spring. The winner was a brilliant, ambitious young woman who had written a powerful essay about the responsibility of programmers to protect user privacy. As I stood on the stage at the high school's award ceremony, shaking her hand and presenting her with the oversized check, I felt a sense of profound, circular justice. The money that Leo had stolen to fund his arrogant, unethical ambitions was now being used to empower a new generation to be better than he was. My revenge was complete. It hadn't just been about exposing a criminal or reclaiming my own dignity. It had been about a fundamental correction. I had taken a system designed for control and surveillance and rebuilt it for privacy and community. I had taken stolen money and transmuted it into an investment in a better, more ethical future. Leo had tried to lock me out. In the end, I had not only opened the door for myself, but had built a dozen new, better doors for everyone else. Life in Willow Creek returned to a new, more secure normal. The resident-run tech system worked flawlessly. The community gate opened when it was supposed to, the thermostat stayed at the right temperature, and everyone slept a little sounder, knowing their data was their own. I became a quiet local hero, the hacker ant who had saved the neighborhood. It was a title I wore with a certain ironic pride. One afternoon, I received a letter with a postmark from a federal correctional facility. It was from Leo. My first instinct was to tear it up, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The letter was not what I expected. There was no anger, no blame. It was a short, stilted, and deeply awkward apology. He wrote about the classes he was taking in prison, about the inmates he had met who had even less than he did, about the slow, dawning realization of the scope of his own arrogance. "They teach us about impact here," he wrote, "the impact of our crimes. I never thought about it. I only thought about the money. I see now that what I did to you and to everyone was more than just theft. It was a violation of trust. I don't know if I can ever fix that, but I'm starting to understand why I need to try." I put the letter down. It wasn't a full redemption, not by a long shot, but it was a start. It was a flicker of self-awareness in a man I thought was a lost cause. I looked out my window at the quiet, peaceful street. My home was safe. My community was secure. And the system that had been designed to control us was now a symbol of our collective strength. I had been called a Luddite, a dinosaur, an old woman afraid of the future. But I had proven that the most powerful technology is useless in the hands of someone without integrity, and that the oldest codes, the codes of honor, justice, and looking out for your neighbors, are the ones that are truly impossible to break. And that brings me to my question for you. In a world that's becoming more and more digital, where do you draw the line between convenience and privacy? What would you do if you found out your community was secretly spying on you? I'd be fascinated to read your thoughts in the comments. If you believe that knowledge is the ultimate weapon against tyranny, and you enjoyed this story, please show your support by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It tells me you want to see more stories where the system gets a system crash of its own. And please don't go. I've placed 2 of my all-time favorite stories of high-tech revenge right here on the screen. The creativity in these is something you will not want to miss. Click on one, and I'll see you on the other side.